Well, as I said in the last video, the next step was to have a look at these guards, and you can see this is very badly rusted in the bottom section there where you would expect it to be, and also the other side guard is pretty well gone in the same place. The good news is that the wired edges are all good. This looks a bit rusty, but it's fine. There's a bit of surface rust in there. This is the piece I'm going to use to replace that. I think I showed those in the last video. Something's gone wrong with my focus there, but there it is there. And I won't use all of this. I'll only cut out what I need to cut out here, and then I'll cut that piece to fit. The guard looks reasonably good. I can only see what appears to be a dent just here, which has been filled from the outside, and that's pretty consistent with the dent in the aluminium light panel, aluminium front shroud panel, in the same place, just on the light. It's obviously had a bit of a bump at some point, but the guards appear to be pretty straight. It would be very, very nice to have a guard or a panel that wasn't dented, so that I could just strip the paint off and basically repaint it. Just an interesting little point of reference for this is that, as you will probably know, these guards are held on by these speed nuts, and there are two different types. There's a longer one which go on these holes, but then there are some shorter ones which go on these holes just below the lights. So if you're replacing those, there's a difference in the two. I can only assume that's because of the welting that goes between there. There's a clearance thing of some sort, and that's not quite so wide. So anyway, there we are. So the next step is to strip down the area that I've got to fix, that I've got to repair, and go to it with the welder. Well, I've just taken some of the paint back, and the bead here is fine. Clearly the car has had some work done before, because I could see file marks and stuff's been done to it, and it has a very thin coat of filler, I guess to perhaps just even out the file marks, and both panels are like that. So it has had work done, and like the rest of the car, it's been stripped right back to the bare metal and reprimed and painted. So somebody spent a lot of time on it, and it actually looks like the work's been done pretty well, I must say. It's not just sort of filled up with filler and just left. So now I've just got to decide how much I'm going to cut off this to affect this repair. So I've roughly marked this out, and the reason I use masking tape is that, I don't know, I just find it a bit easier to run along with a cutting tool, and I'll probably use either a jigsaw or a 1mm cutting blade on an angle grinder, a cut-off blade, or both, perhaps a Dremel for bits I can't get into. But I just find it easier to go along this straight edge for some reason, and I always have done. I guess it's no different to drawing a line, but I find it easier. Now I'm going to have to take this little bit off here, and there are several spot welds in here. I have a spot weld cutter. It's really just I don't know whether it's not focusing very well, but it's just a serrated saw blade. You've probably seen them, but they are fantastic if you're drilling out spot welds, because what they do is they take the steel away from the top layer that we don't want, and they leave the back layer there, and then you can just grind it flat. So I'll use that and show you the effect that it gives. So I've cut out the spot welds just out of the top layer, and you can see here, or you may not be able to see because the camera doesn't really focus very well that close. I'm trying to get down here. You can see how the two layers have been separated. See how that, and it's very hard to do. I really need a camera assistant of some sort, but see how they've just separated? So when I've got this top layer off, what I'm going to be left with is the back layer with 4 little circles still welded to there, which I can just grind off. So if you haven't got a spot weld cutter and you're doing this sort of work, well, get one. They're not very expensive. So there it is. That took about 5 minutes to cut out, probably less. And you can see that the tape has enabled me to have a nice straight line, and I can obviously just peel that off, and I've got the section there ready for the new piece that I will cut from the Kilmartin's panel and weld in. Here's the piece that I took out, which I will ceremoniously dump, I suppose, in the rubbish bin, but not before I've used it as a measuring point for the new piece I'm going to put in. I actually made some data marks here, which you can just see at 300 mils, or just under a foot up from the bottom of the sill, just as an added precaution. But what I'll do is I'll make the new piece, I'll tack it in place in just 1 or 2 places, and then I'll fit this wing onto the car and see how it goes before I do the welding. And you can see here what's left of those little spot welds that I cut out, just little raised circles from the original plate, which I'll just grind off. Of course, all this has got to be de-rusted. Doesn't look like it's had any paint on it up behind here, so I'm going to spend a fair bit of time getting in there, and I'll probably treat it with phosphoric acid and get all the rust out of it, so that it doesn't come back in a hurry. Anyway, there we go. That's one wing cut out. I won't bother to film the other one because it's really the same sort of process. So after quite a bit of time spent cutting, filing, taking off, putting on, taking off, putting on, that panel actually fits fairly well now. Well, actually, it fits very well. And I'm just going to try it all on the car and see if it fits properly on the car before I do any welding on it. Well, it's on and it's welded, and I've done a bit of cleaning up, and it looks worse than it is. Actually pretty smooth. A bit of filing. It will of course take a little bit of filler. I'm not a good enough welder to get away without using any filler. I don't think many people are. When I visited the Healey factory about a month ago here in Melbourne, I went to the workshop there, and the body man showed me a panel he'd welded into the bottom of a door, and he'd done it with a TIG welder, and the weld was about 2 mil wide and perfect, and he hadn't even sanded it back or cleaned it up or anything. So unfortunately that's a bit beyond my expertise, but this will be okay when it's all filled and finally sanded down. So I'm just trial fitting the right hand side mudguard. I did the same for the other side, and I didn't film it. The other side fits really well, but this one here, I haven't welded anything in yet, of course. These are just my clamps. But this one here, the sill actually sits, well, not the sill, but the mudguard sits about 1/4 inch below the level of the sill there. Both of those should line up, and they don't. So I'm going to have to do a bit more work on this, I think, in order to get it to fit properly. You can't really see it from up the top, but it's probably going to annoy me a little bit. So I'll sort that out before I do any welding. Well, I've trimmed about 5mm off the height of that. I suppose it's about 3/16 of an inch. We tend to work in metric in Australia, and the fit it's still a millimetre or so below, but I think when that's all pulled up, that's going to be fine, because I really wanted to get this nice line across the bottom of the sill and across the bottom of the front guard. Those little welding clamps I made worked a treat. So I guess the next thing now is to take the guard off and fire up the MIG. Well, both of the fenders are fitted on now, and the fit is pretty good. So there's the new panel on this side that was welded in. Fits up nice and tight to the sill there, you can see. So I'm pretty pleased with that. And the other side is good as well. Of course, it's going to take a little bit of filler just to sort of tidy it up a bit, but the other side has also come up well. There's a couple of little areas there I'm not all that happy with, and I might just have a go at re-welding a couple of little spots, but again, the fit there against the sill is good, and I'm glad that I altered it so that it would that sort of bottom level was good.
I think I might have a few issues with the bottom gap between the sill, outer sill, and the door. I did try and the car was on a rotisserie when I welded them in, and in retrospect I should have left the outer sills to weld in till the door fitting period, but I did line it all up and it seemed to be okay, and I did know that you're supposed to put the engine and gearbox in, but it just wasn't practical. So the next step is to have a look at the doors, and because I have to replace the bottoms of the doors anyway, I can probably manufacture those to fit this sill without having to unweld the sill and rework it. But if I have to, I have to. However, there's a bit of progress made, and it's coming along nicely. That's quite a lot of welding there.